batteries died. Laptop mic it.
Okay. Hello. Yay, you guys can hear me. Cool. I guess I'll start now. This is, I think, the third um series or third part of the series. It's the macOS part. So yeah, let's start. The malware I'm going to talk about is FinSpy. It is a really cool malware created by a company called FinFisher, and I'll talk more about it in the next slide. But before we start, I'm just gonna do a quick who am I. It's me again, Emmanuel, tech lead. Love malware and all that stuff, mostly macOS, but anything is fine. I can do it. Apart from that, I also play different instruments. I have two pet potatoes. I finally give them a name, and it is Yam Solo and Stud Lightyear. I hope those are really good names. But yeah, those are my two potato names, and I like to longboard. So, who is FinFisher, or what is FinFisher? Well, they are a company founded in Germany, and it's privately owned, and they do business with a bunch of government and just anyone that's willing to pay for spyware. So the goal for the company is to get, actually next slide actually tells more about it. It says their mission is to be the global trusted advisor for law enforcement. So work with the government to catch bad guys. Sounds cool. And the vision is to provide a first class cyber solution. I thought that was really funny because as you go on, this is the funniest. I think it's funny malware. But yeah, the goal of this company is just to help governments capture important people like criminals, terrorists, and depending on what country you are, possibly um, human rights fighters. So yeah. So why did I pick this malware? Well, about 2 weeks ago, it came up in the news, and I should have moved this over, but it came up in the news, and it's some malware that some person found. And the one thing that got my interest was that it is not just for a specific OS. It is for Android, Windows, macOS, and Linux. So I was like, wow, it has all of it. This must be really fun. And I decided to also take a look because why not? So first thing we do is we get the sample. I got it from Objective-C, so that's a cool website if you're interested in anything macOS related. He has a lot of blogs about it, so that's where I got my sample from. And the first thing we notice is that the malware is a DMG file. So that's a Dix, DIXSK image. I'm not going to say the word, but it's pretty much mounted on your computer, so on your MacBook, and you can install the actual binary slash application. So this, I believe this is the equivalent for like when you plug in your USB-C and it gives you a little like letter for whatever devices you plugged in. But yeah, so we mount the malware to get the actual malware, which is in this case install whatever that name is, that app, and that is an application bundle. So when you, again, it's an application bundle, so it has a bunch of files, and inside of it, it has the macOS folder is where the original binary is. So just like if you have your calculator app, it's just the image is not the binary. So not like Windows where the exe is just that thing you see on top. It actually goes this in there. So first thing I notice is we have two binaries, well, two executables and an hidden file called .log. So right off the start, this is already suspicious. Not even Even the application that's already in the .log file folder is also a random name, so that's also a red flag. So what do we do next? Well, I ran files. Well, first thing I look for is the info.plist, which is a file that contains the metadata of the overall application. So it has informations like the executable it runs when you click on that icon. It tells you the OS build, so where the binary or the application was compiled from. And from there, you can also tell, like, again, the version of the Mac OS the developers using and what version of Xcode, which is an IDE, used on Mac OS. So in this case, we were able to tell that the install, whatever name, whatever, I can't say that name, that install is the executable. So that's the entry point. And we can see the build is 12F45, which is equivalent to the OS X 10.85, 10.8.5. So that, and also we can get the version. So when you first get a malware or just any application, the info.plist is the first. It's always a good place to look for. So it's like also kind of like strings too. Actually, no, that's wrong. It's just looking at the metadata. So next, we found the entry point, which was that install weird name. And when you do a file on that, all of it, you can see that the install is actually a bash script, and the installer is it's a binary. So looking good. So when we cat that bash file, we can see what it's doing. It's changing its directory to that log, the hidden file, and taking that and opening that up. And that, we'll get to that later, but that's the thing that the user gets to see to get to pretend like it's a like an actual application, to pretend pretty much that's the Trojan application. Then it removes itself, which is the installer script, then moves that installer to the same name as its previous, to the installer cat something something name. And after that, it removes that directory, then launches itself, and boom, it does. We're going to look at what that binary does itself. But before we get there, we want to look at what that ARA or something something file is. And virus total is always a good place to sometimes start to. As we can see, this was, I guess, analyzed a day ago, and you can see a lot of, at least half of the virus total application detected it, so that's good. And we found out that it was unsigned. I want to see if I have a picture for this. I don't. Well, it's unsigned. So in macOS, if an application it's not unsigned, it's kind of hard to get your application up and running, and except the user explicitly clicks allow, it's not going to run. So eventually, we find out that this is a backdoor for more malware. But in the meantime, it's already bad because it's all red. Next is we go back to the installer script, so that this is the binary that we found. And again, going back to the basics, we do strings on it, and we see a list of really cool looking names. So we see ptrace. If you don't know that, that's tracing. So kind of like tracking the syscall. So that's already nice. No. You can see also VMware, virus, not VMware. We can see VirtualBox, Parallels. So those three are like for VMs. I forgot what you call those, but that's used to detect if it's in the sandbox. So that's, so we can assume that this binary is trying to evade detection. Yeah, sandbox detection. And we also see the shell. We see a Python path. We see kern, like a kernel related word, and we see the 06777. I believe that sets the UID sets the set UID for a binary. So already again red flag, blah blah blah. And just going back, we see a bunch of another text files, zip files, and all that stuff. And another thing that caught my attention is the login.kext. That is a module, a kernel module. So this would work if you had the previous versions of macOS. So like the macOS, whatever version before Big Sur, but because now you cannot. That's not allowed, but that's for another day. But we can tell there's a kernel module in this application, and it's gonna try to get that together. Um, so again, what do we have so far? We can tell that the binary is doing some anti-debugging with the ptrace, some virtual machine detection based on those three popular um, machines, virtual machines over there. And we can also assume it has some scripts just because it calls Python, and we found like a file called helper2. We don't know what that is yet, but that we can assume that might work together. And we have some launch agent persistence. So a good way to hide your program or malware on macOS is usually to create a plist, which is like I want to say it's kind of like an XML file, similar, but it kind of has like a key value arrangement where you can tell it to run at a launch. So you can think of this as the registry keys in Windows. And again, kernel module just based on the .kext extension. So far so good. Okay, now we decide to find the functions inside that binary. This part was kind of new to me, so I used a tool called class dump. I actually found out about that like 2 days ago. So it goes through a binary and extract the function name. Not always accurate, but it works. So right away we can see, I think, few interesting functions like unload cert kernel module, big flag, load and unload agent. So that's probably another agent that's going to be installed. And just going back to the top, we can see some execute trampoline. That to me sounds kernel module stuff. And also a lot of traces and all that stuff. So again, doing some really interesting stuff. And we go to disassemble. Just a disclaimer, I was not able personally to do this, so this was not my code. I borrowed it from Patrick, Objective-C, so thank you. But from that binary, we can see this is the main function, and obviously it's obfuscated, so they have some kind of protection over their malware. But just based on the names and the strings we've seen before, we can assume that this is where it's doing the virtual machine detection. It's going through each version and trying to see, oh, is this a VMware based on the manufacturer by the MAC address? So it's doing that, and it's also checking for the ptrace flag again, which is for anti-debugging. So if it sees that, it just breaks and never execute its what it's supposed to do. So that's what it does in the main function. And if you're able to bypass that side, this is where the fun part starts, because it unzips a file called arch.zip and saves that into the library / cache of a user. So / user / my name library cache, and saves that folder well, the unzipped version of the arc.zip into that. And in there, that's where we get another bunch of files, but we'll get to that later. And yeah, actually, it's right there. Next slide. Next slide. We get eight more new files to analyze, and that's good. This is a, I'll just say this is a really, really intense slash not complex, but it really takes a lot of time because it's just a bunch of files inside each other. But we run files on it, and we have a bunch of binaries in just one Python script. So we can always start there. We can also see the kernel module and the plist. Again, plist are really important. It's used for persistence. So always a good place to look to. So I believe I go through each one of them one by one, and let's see. Again, thanks to Patrick, I would not have been able to figure that out myself. So yeah. So the first one we do is helper. That's the hash, and again, really already flagged as malicious by VirusTotal. And this is what is shown to the user. So when they double click on that malware and it pretends to be the original one, it asks for your username and password. But what does it use? Why does it ask for that? Well, this is for the next stage, which is to get the installer to be owned by root and also change that to have the set UID. So every time that is executed, obviously the binary runs as root and they can be root every time they try to connect to your machine. And after that, it also tries to install the original binary, which is a flash updater. Usually, I don't know why, but most macOS malware usually acts the Trojan application is always the Flash application stuff. I don't know why, but it's really weird. So doing some uh doing some function stuff, we can see there's a function called the install payload, and what it does is it just launch the next stage, which is again the installer. Nothing really special for this stage. It just gets everything ready. And this is the another cool part. This is the helper 2, the Python script. Let's see if we can see what's saying. It's trying to write to etc sudo. Oh yeah, sorry. Before I go on, I believe this helper um binary is trying to exploit. Yeah, it is actually. It's trying to exploit some privilege escalation vulnerability for Mac OS less than 10.5. I might be wrong on that, but we will see later on. But uh, the helper 2 is just a Python script, and it opens the etc sudo file and tries to write to it by giving its user root all permission to run everything with no password. So that's cool. Then it creates a fork, then writes to the etc cron tab. I don't. Oh, okay. The what it seems like what it's doing is it's writing. It's just changing the permissions again to that installer. So I guess it's doing this every minute. I've not really read the script, but I just want you guys to see that this is one of the things um, it has. Um, oh, actually, it is this one too. And this guy's Finn Fisher, you would expect them to actually do some complex looking like malware, like find some 0 days, but no, they like to use publicly available exploit from 2015. So as you can see, it's tested on 10.9.5 and 10.10.5. So kind of outdated, but It is what it is. People are just lazy. So much for international international cyber advisor copying. Please don't attack me. I'm sorry if you're watching this. Okay, for three. This is another binary, and again, this is another one that uses a publicly available exploit, and this one is just a local privilege escalation for 10.10.5 and lower, and it's actually public. So if you want to read it, it's a bunch of Objective C's. If you know that, good for you. It's that link down there, so you can have some fun. And this is the installer, the main part. I'm still working on this, but according to a write-up, it does three main things. It copies a bunch of plugins and configurations to a location, which is the slash library slash framework slash storage framework. It takes all of that and just saves it there, so in case it needs it. It also copies the launcher, which is another way to install the installer if it ever gets deleted. It saves that into the slash private slash etc slash logd. And the last one it does is persist itself. So again, login d.plist, again, persistent file, it copies that and saves that into the slash system slash library slash launch agents there. And actually, we get to see what's in that file later on. But now let's talk about the fun part, the rootkit. I've never seen a rootkit for macOS, so this was really cool. I thought, but it's apparently not really. Um, so just like how macOS is preventing people from running on signed applications, if your binary or if your kernel module is not signed, it does not work. Luckily, they were able to detect this and just revoke the signature. So apparently, it's not going to work. Uh, Also, it's not going to work for the newer versions again. Kernel modules are not allowed. Yay! I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but again, I didn't get to do this myself. This is from Objective-C, but from here, what we can see is that it is doing some lookup. It's looking up some functions. So this is the equivalent of doing system hooking. Well, you're looking for a system call. So when you want to eject the syscall read, this is kind of what it's doing. As you can see, it's using that function ksim underscore resolve symbol by blah, blah, blah. That's what it's doing. It's just finding that function. But in this case, it's just addresses, but again, it's just lookup. And as it goes on, we find this function, ph underscore hide. That's the main part of this malware. It's just hiding processes. It's not as complex as it might sound, but for a rootkit created by an international cyber company, this is pretty trash, apparently. I didn't say this, it was just from the paper. They were like, so much for this fancy ass malware. It's just, but yeah, again, it goes on and it looks like it's reading from the slash temp random file. So what we can get from this is that it's getting the process name, since in the process hiding function, it does not give you like a prefix of what to hide. So this is like a middleman to talk to the user land. So it has this file that has a list of processes that needs to be hidden from the user, and the rootkit just opens that, reads that, and does its magic and hides it from the user. But again, this just hides it from, I think, the access, the activity monitor, but there's multiple ways you can still find the process even though it's hidden. But I didn't go that far again. And back to the P list. This is what is in that list. This is its persistence method. as we can see, it's running the /private/etc/login d. So this will, if it gets deleted, if the installer gets deleted, this says no, 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 I'm gonna come back and install myself. And again, it's really weird. It's kind of hard to read this list, but like next at the bottom it says run at loads, and that's set to true. So every time you restart your computer, it starts. Kind of like a cron job. Yeah. Or what's the equivalent in Windows? It's the task scheduler. That. And there's more stuff, but that's not the fun part. The part is it runs at load, and it tells you what binary it's running at load. So you can find those locations and delete it. What about the C2s? Obviously, it has to talk to someone. Well, I did not get to that part. That was another long rabbit hole, so I decided not to go. But if you guys want to read more about this malware, there are, again, Objective-C gave his own walkthrough, and there's another company that I would show you at the end. But again, whatever I learned, it is really fun to do malware. macOS reversing, it's just reading a bunch of Objective-C and trying to understand why people like to use Flash updater. But apart from that, I was able to find some new tools like class dump. That makes it much easier. So rather than using strings and just getting a bunch of garbage, I can just find the function names that are really important. And some tools I also used was something called Floss by FireEye. It's like string, but on steroids, so it's much better. And multiple tools like Process Monitor, because the one by default is not cool. So you have to make yours to make it cooler. And it's, again, by Objective-C. And there's multiple tools on his website that really helps you with all of this. Yeah, so if you want to read more about this malware and exactly know how that C2 communication works and how the Rootkit does its magic, you can always go to voila. The last link is actually from the 90s, I think, and it was, I think, right in the first macOS Rootkit, so that was pretty cool. I didn't finish it yet, but it's pretty cool. Any questions?
I'll ask you a question later.
Point is, macOS are really fun. Everyone should get a MacBook. Apple, hire me, please.
The wrong webcam.
Oh, never mind.
Alrighty, are we good to go? I'm gonna admit Anthony now.